Hello, I am Elizabeth, and I am the Catholic Lady Talks, and we're currently reading Great Lion of God by Taylor Caldwell. We're at chapter 49, part 2. His sister's house, where Sephora's husband and her husband's father had been born, and all her own children, was like a rescue to Saul, like a loving refuge. Sephora's once bright hair was almost as white as his own, and her grandchildren stood about her like saplings around an old parent tree. She embraced Saul with tears and laughter, and he found the kisses of the little ones pure and endearing, and many of the scars he carried on his soul became smooth and halted their aching. "We are no longer young," he said to Sephora, as they wandered in the calm and lovely gardens he remembered, and paused by the very bench on which he had sat and wept dolorously when a youth, to be found there and comforted by his father, so long dead. Here he had crouched in anguish in the spring, and it was spring again, the Pentecostal season. Nothing had changed except himself and the human world. Nature and nature's law went their way indifferently, as heedless of man as the clouds themselves, and as remote. "We are not old unless we desire to be," said Sephora, and her wrinkled face was sweet. "I feel in my heart that I am still a girl, joyful and expectant, eager for each newly minted day, and love is still ruler of my heart." She touched his hand gently, remembering how many he had lost, and how weary and dusty was his way, and how misunderstood, and how full of danger and wretchedness. But still he was Saul, her brother, and his eyes still held passion and steadfastness, and his spirit shone forth, and so flesh was nothing. He told her of the letters he had received from his cousin Titus Milo Platonius, the Praetorian general in Rome, for no longer did he believe that all women were superficial and light and trivial and unable to understand important matters. He saw maternal wisdom in Sephora's golden eyes, which were immortally young and gay, and the intrepid valor of her soul. He thought to himself that she resembled their dead father, whom he had so misjudged. "Milo," he said, "is most unhappy in Rome under the domination of that vile commander of the Praetorian Guard, Tigellinus, who is his superior officer, and who, at the instigation of the wife of Caesar, Poppaea, murdered the old commander Bursus. Ah, there is a wicked woman, truly the harlot of Babylon. For did she not incite Nero, Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, to murder his mother Agrippina out of jealousy and fear of the mother's influence? Tigellinus hates Milo, and Milo does not fear death, but his soldiers love him, and so Tigellinus refrains from still another murder, though it may not be for long. Alas, that men like our cousin are becoming more rare each day, and rarer still are men like his father, Aulus. Milo is a reproach to the Roman court, and to Nero, for he is a man of virtue and a Christian, though others do not know this. Can we not induce our cousin to return to Israel, where he was born, and on the night the Messiah was born? He is old too, but indomitable. If he remains in Rome, he will surely die." "I have written him also," replied Sephora, "but he answers that his duty is in the city of his fathers, for is he not a Roman as well as a Jew?" She sighed and smiled. He danced at my wedding, and how he drank. She thought of the days of her girlhood, and it seemed to her that it was the dream of another, and not herself, and she had heard of it only by rumor. "Why do you not visit him, Saul, and implore him to return to us for at least a space?" "I? Visit Rome?" Saul was incredulous. "That seat of vice and infamy and murder, of luxury and terror, and unspeakable lewdness, of crime and degeneracy? God forbid." "But Simon Peter is there," said Sephora. "Did you not know? He left but a month ago, for the Christian community in Rome is in disarray. The Roman populace has taken a dislike to the Christians, of whom they tell vile lies, and of whom they make the wickedest accusations. Jew and Christian, they are equally hated in Rome, and are the jest of the people who complain that Claudius Caesar had once expelled the Jews, but Nero permitted them to return. I hear he is a most vicious and decadent man for all his youth, and one wonders why he allowed the Jews to resume their home in Rome and regain a measure of their property. Perhaps, said Saul with gloom, he wishes to make of them a scapegoat, as have other rulers in other nations. His words, even to himself, seemed incredible, and then a cold wind touched him between the shoulder blades, and he shivered. He said, I knew Peter had gone to Rome. We never loved each other, for each of us believed that our way was the only way. And Saul smiled. But in his name we were reconciled, in spite of Mark, who never loved me either. Sephora took his browned and calloused hand in hers and said, My brother, you are as easily hated as loved, for never do you falter, and your opinions are inflexible, and your judgment, alas, is usually correct. Now Sephora, sighing again, spoke of Jerusalem and of the people, whose despair increased hourly. The new procurator Felix hated the Jews even more than had Pontius Pilate, and conspired with the high priest and his minions to oppress and steal from the people and to break their spirit. What they had endured under Pilate was nothing to what they endured now, for their own priest had turned against them and plotted against them and reduced them to fearful anguish. They were robbed of their last substance in taxes to be sent to Rome and to support the temple, which the priest profaned by their very presence. The priest imposed enormous tithes even on the destitute, and woe to that man and his family if the money was not forthcoming on demand. Now assassins, nameless, roamed through the purlieus of the temple and left blood and dead bodies behind them, and no one knew what vengeance they were executing, whether on the worshippers or on their oppressors. It was said that King Agrippa was responsible, that he wished to reduce his people to the status of slaves in order to please the Romans. Still others said that the assassins were zealots or Essenes, and that they were revenging the insult to the temple. And still others said that they were Christians or Nazarenes, as they were still called in Jerusalem, young men intent on overthrowing the government to Felix and of Rome, and of King Agrippa. I only know we all live in terror, said Sephora. The people pray to God in one voice for deliverance from their tyrants, Jew and Nazarene together, and the longing for God in the hearts of our poor people is in agony. They see the priesthood living in luxury on the money stolen and wrested from them, and see those closest to the high priest reveling with the Romans in the most indecent of orgies and celebrations, and in blood spectacles in the circuses, and in licentious plays at the theater. When the people periodically could endure no more, there were mysterious murders of both Jewish priests and Romans, and then there were accusations that the excessive zealots had accomplished these crimes, and the zealots were hunted out and crucified, and the people subsided in renewed terror and were quiet for a time. Never was our people and our nation in so desperate a plight, said Sephora. Saul gazed at the tender blue sky, and then at the pink almond blossoms, and the flowering palms and the pomegranates, and he thought how beautiful was the world, and how immeasurably evil was man, who created murder and hatred and ruin and ugliness out of his own heart, and delighted in the pain of the innocent and in their oppression, and made victims of his brothers. For him had the Messiah come and given up his blameless life. It is well, perhaps, that I have returned, said Saul. I was commanded so in a vision, but I am only one man, and neither the Jews nor the Christians will hearken to me, here in my own nation and among my own people. I do not know why I am here. It is in the hands of God, for I do not know where I must start and what I must say. He contemplated the modern world of blood and plunder, of monstrous Caesars and faithless priests, of debaucheries and wars, and of hatred among the peoples, of despair and tears and terror, of mindless rage and cruelty. excuse me, of exploitation and slavery, of imprecations on the weak and the glorification of the strong. Surely the world he had known as a youth had not been so wicked. Surely it had not been so depraved and heartless. It was as if the Messiah had never been born, and that the legions of hell now ruled the earth. Surely, he said to himself, when this age passes, there will be peace and kindness among men. The present would pass like a direful dream, and the future ages would bask in the sun of the Messiah. For that he worked and hoped and prayed. And there shall be war no more. Nor would there be enmity and malice and lust and fury and hatred. All would pass, and men would rejoice in the new and celestial dispensation. That's the end of chapter 49, and we'll see you again with chapter 50.